The story begins with a stillness, the kind of stillness you only find deep within a coniferous forest, where the air is cool and smells of pine. Echo Creek Lake, hidden away from the bustle of the greater world, was the jewel of this land, and it was here to the shore, to the edge of the crystal-clear water that Ethan Cavendish arrived. Reflected in his eyes were not only the pines and the clear sky, but also memories stretching back to his very childhood. This lake was more to him than just a body of water. It was the place where his father, a man of few words but great depth, used to bring him to fish. They would sit for hours, exchanging only a few rare phrases, and in that silence, they understood each other better than in any conversation. Now, decades later, Ethan had returned. He had a purpose. He wanted to restore this tradition, to feel a connection to the past that, he felt, had been severed by time and circumstance. Ethan took his fishing rods and tackle from the bed of his old but well-kept pickup truck. He was dressed in simple, comfortable clothes, and a light, ironic smile played on his face. He knew this shore had changed. On the opposite side, among the ancient pines, stood an imposing building. This was the modern, stylish, even ostentatious Sunny Shore Fishing Club, belonging to the Oak Ridge Homeowners Association. The local residents who had bought land in this prestigious area had turned Ethan's place of childhood memories into an exclusive recreation club. He had not even had time to cast his line when she appeared on the shore. A tall, slender woman in a strict suit with an incredibly stern expression, Veronica Stone. Ethan would later learn she was a member of the HOA board, but at that moment he saw only the embodiment of everything that irritated him about modern society. "You will immediately remove your boat and leave this private property." Her voice was as cold as a winter wind. She did not introduce herself or greet him. She simply issued an ultimatum. Ethan, without stopping his smile, slowly looked up. "Private property?" he asked with feigned surprise. "It seems to me this is still a lake, and I haven't seen a single sign forbidding me to be here." "This is Sunny Shore Club property. You are not a member. There are rules here that you are violating. Now get out." Veronica spoke as if arguing with a difficult child. She was accustomed to people bowing to her domineering tone and was completely unprepared to meet the slightest resistance. Ethan cast his line, and the tackle settled into the water with a characteristic swoosh. "You know, I wouldn't be so quick to jump to conclusions," he said, watching his bobber. "I have certain rights to this lake. You could even say that I own it." Veronica let out a short, contemptuous laugh. Her tone became even more arrogant. "Owner." She looked at his simple clothes and old pickup. "Are you trying to deceive me? This lake has always been part of our community. Don't waste my time. I'll contact the board now. They'll get you out of here quickly." She turned and walked away briskly, leaving Ethan alone. He just shrugged and continued to fish. He knew this was only the beginning, and ahead of him lay not only a confrontation, but an opportunity to teach a lesson. A lesson that Veronica, it seemed, had long deserved. Ethan's premonition was not wrong. The next day, Veronica returned, and her tone was even more aggressive. This time, she was not alone. A large, impassive HOA security officer stood beside her. His uniform presence was apparently meant to give Veronica's words more weight. "You ignored my warning," she declared, crossing her arms over her chest. "I must tell you, this is your final warning. If you do not leave, we will be forced to call the sheriff, and then you will have legal problems." In her eyes burned a desire to assert herself at his expense, to prove to him and herself that she was in charge here. In her words, there was not only anger, but also a hidden, biting note of racism, which, as Ethan knew, was part of her nature. Ethan, however, did not flinch. He calmly stood, setting his fishing rod aside. "I think we can avoid that." His voice was soft, but there was steel in it. "Look, I perfectly understand that you like to consider this lake your own, but it's not. This is my property, belonging to the Aurora Holdings Trust, and I, Ethan Cavendish, am its rightful owner." Veronica simply scoffed, considering this another bluff. "A trust? Aurora Holdings?" She laughed, looking at the security officer. "I don't know who put such nonsense in your head, but Echo Creek Lake has always been part of the Oak Ridge community. You do not own this lake, and you dare not say otherwise. You are simply lying." "I'm not lying," Ethan replied without a trace of emotion. "And if I were you, I wouldn't throw around such accusations. I suggest you simply check the public records at the Oak Ridge County Registrar's office. There you will find all the necessary documents to prove my words. I think that would be better than calling the sheriff." Despite the firmness of his voice, Veronica rejected his words with contempt. She was too confident in her own righteousness and her privileged position to believe that some outsider could own something so valuable. Ethan, seeing that the conversation was futile, silently gathered his things. As he drove away, he reflected not on anger but on a lack of respect. This was something his father had always despised and something he would not tolerate. His decision was made. First, Ethan returned to his office and meticulously checked all his documents: the deed of transfer, the agreement with the HOA that he had inherited. Everything was in place. He discovered that the HOA's access to the lake was not a right, but rather a courtesy from the previous owner, and the term of that agreement had long since expired without being renewed. To be absolutely sure, Ethan contacted his legal contact, Mr. Grant, who handled his affairs. "Mr. Grant, I need you to double-check the agreement with the Oak Ridge HOA. It seems I have a small problem with understanding property lines there," Ethan said with slight irony. Mr. Grant assured him that all the documents were in order, and the HOA had no legal grounds for their behavior. Next, Ethan personally visited the Oak Ridge County Registrar's office. It was a formal but important action. He wanted to make sure that all the documents concerning his ownership of the lake and the surrounding land were properly registered and available for anyone to check. And of course, everything was as he had expected. Now that his position was confirmed on all levels, he proceeded with decisive action. Ethan sat down and wrote a formal letter to the HOA. It was not a letter of threats or anger. It was a letter written with dignity, in which he, as the rightful owner, informed the board of the suspension of access to the lake due to the expiration of the old agreement. He personally delivered it to the HOA office, handing it to the secretary with a polite but firm expression. The first reaction came immediately. George Harris, the president of the HOA, called him. His voice was a mix of politeness and an attempt to exert pressure. "Mr. Cavendish, I think there's a misunderstanding here. Let's discuss this. I'm sure we can come to an agreement." But Ethan was unyielding. "There is no misunderstanding, Mr. Harris. There is only a lack of respect. I will not negotiate anything until you learn to speak to me as a person, not as a trespasser. When you understand that this is not just about land but about personal dignity, we can return to the conversation." Ron's words, however, could not stop the wave that began to spread throughout the community. Rumors, gossip, anonymous flyers accusing Ethan of all sorts of wrongdoing began to appear on notice boards and in mailboxes. Veronica, of course, was at the forefront of this campaign, trying to discredit him. But at the same time as this wave of hatred, another one emerged. Some support from residents who disagreed with Veronica's aggressive behavior and felt she had gone too far. At this difficult moment, Ethan received a call from Sarah Wilson, a new member of the HOA board. Her voice was full of genuine remorse. "Mr. Cavendish, I'm calling to apologize for this whole situation. I don't agree with Veronica's behavior. We would really like to resolve this problem if possible." Her call was the first ray of light for Ethan in this escalating drama. The community was electrified. News of the emergency HOA meeting to discuss the lake issue had spread to all residents. The meeting hall was packed. The mood was tense, like before a storm. Veronica Stone, sitting at the board table, looked furious, but her voice no longer sounded as confident as before. Next to her sat George Harris, the HOA president, who, although he tried to remain unflappable, was clearly concerned. Finally, he invited Ethan Cavendish to the microphone. Ethan stood up and walked to the podium. His appearance was calm, his posture impeccable. There was no anger in his eyes, only self-assurance. He began to speak, and his voice, though quiet, made the entire hall fall silent. "I am Ethan Cavendish, and this lake for me is not just property. It's memories. It's my father who taught me to fish here. He told me that respect is the most important thing a person has, and that it cannot be demanded, but it can be earned." He paused, looking at the attendees. "My actions were not revenge. I didn't want to punish any of you. I just wanted to be respected, to be seen as a person, not as a trespasser. I will not apologize for demanding to be treated with dignity. Veronica, unable to contain her anger, jumped up from her seat. "You didn't come to us first. You just cut off our access without giving us a chance to negotiate," she shouted. Ethan turned his head toward her, his gaze cold. "I did come to you first, Veronica. Twice. And you," he emphasized the word, "threatened me with the sheriff. You called me a liar. You insulted me because you thought I had no right to be here. I gave you a chance, and you missed it." The hall fell silent. Ethan's words, spoken with such dignity, had hit their mark. He finished his speech. "I am prepared to consider restoring access to the lake, but only on my terms, and only if you learn to respect not only me, but the lake itself. This is personal." The meeting ended with Veronica, under pressure from George and the other members, being forced to resign from the HOA board. And Ethan, full of resolve, returned to the lake. Not just to fish, but to begin its restoration. His plan was to clean the shore, reinforce the soil, and create a place that would once again be perfect. He worked alone, but not for long. One day, Tom Bannon, an elderly man, and his grandson Liam approached him. "Mr. Cavendish, we saw what you were doing," Tom said, nodding toward the cleared shore. "We'd like to help. I have a boat, and Liam is great at cleaning." Soon, Sarah Wilson also joined them, actively helping with the work organization. In this way, step by step, Ethan began to see how his actions had led to change. Residents who had initially been hostile now approached him, expressing their gratitude and understanding for what he had done. In the end, Ethan signed a new, revised access agreement. It was detailed and clear. Conditions of use, maintenance schedules, rules of conduct, and mandatory instruction for all members of the fishing club. It was a document based not on assumptions, but on mutual respect. Ethan often sat on the shore of the lake, in that same stillness he remembered from his childhood. He realized that respect is not something you can demand, but something you earn through your actions. He did not yell, he did not threaten, but his quiet, firm stance had led to real changes in the hearts and minds of an entire community. He had restored not only the lake, but also the belief that even in the most modern and elite society, true value is determined not by status and power, but by dignity and kindness.